everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soulful Connections. Very delayed, very sorry. To address the elephant in the room before the video starts, as you can see, it's just me. And going forward with Soulful Connections, that's how we will be doing things. Not that we won't have like guests on the show or anything like that, but going forward, I will be the main host of the podcast, and I appreciate everyone for understanding. There's no drama, there's no story. It is what it is. That's how life works sometimes. And so yeah. And for today's episode, it's going to be a very vulnerable moment for me because to start out my new testimony series, I'm actually going to be starting with my own. So let's go ahead and get started and let's jump into how Jesus saved my life. This is going to be a really vulnerable moment for me as I kind of like open up. And I've gone back and forth. I've given bits and pieces since the beginning of the podcast about my testimony, but I've never outright put it out there. And so this is going to be really vulnerable for me. And it's something that, I don't just throw out there, but I have come to understand that my testimony is a part of an even bigger testimony, which is the testimony of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to put it out there and we're just going to see. So let's go ahead and get started. The year is 2002. It's December 17th. I am born. I went through a lot of my childhood not knowing about God or Jesus or anything like that, right? Because I didn't start going to church till I was about 8, I'd like to say. It could be 7 or 8, I'm not sure. But my mom was invited to church by an aunt, and she said yes, and we started going to church with my aunt. But she lived a little ways away, so that didn't last very long. But then my mom found a church way closer to home, so we actually started going to that church. And we went there for a few years, and everything was good. When you're a kid, you kind of like don't fully comprehend everything. But we were still going to church, and then my my parents got separated. Very traumatic event, actually. It was a really dark time. Um, because my mom she's always been a stay-at-home mom, and now she's having to take care of 3 children, small children, mind you, all by herself. Like she's never had a job before, and this is back in like 2000. I think 11, like 2011 to 2012. No, I lied. Because cause December 21st, 2012 was when the world was supposed to end. No, my parents were still together then. Okay, I'm sorry. 2014, there we go. 2014 is when my parents initially got separated, and it was a really hard time because my mom was having to get a job and we didn't have a lot of family to kind of help with the kids. So I was watching my 2 little brothers a lot, and I understand that it was something that was a necessity, right? But it really messed me up, I think, because I had to skip hanging out with friends, having sleepovers, doing normal kid stuff. And then my mom took a break from church. I think she really got weak in her faith. And so fast forward a few years, God kind of tells my mom, like, you need to get it together, and all of this, right? And at that same time, we are being like evicted. Like the bank is leaving eviction notices on our house. And my mom, she's working a job where she makes about $7 an hour, and it wasn't enough to cover everything. She was barely getting food and on the table and getting the electricity bill paid. And so it was a lot. Plus, I'm still having to watch my brothers. And around that same time, my dad is kind of like in and out of my mom's life, kind of messing with her a bit. And at the exact same time, my mom's mom dies. And I think that that really put my mom kind of into an emotional overload. It hurt all of us, but of course, it didn't hurt us as much as it hurt her. And, but even though that had happened, I think a lot of things started kind of looking up when my mom met my stepdad. And that event I can only describe as like God. There's no other thing that I can use to describe what happened in that time. And the only reason one of the reasons I say that is because my mom, a single mom with 3 kids, meets a man at her job, a random man that, and after a couple weeks of dating, he buys my mom a house. And land, like there's nothing else I can describe that with than just saying that that was God. He bought my mom a house. He bought her some land. He never treated me and my brothers like we weren't his, even though we were very horrible to him, I won't lie. But from that point forward, my mom's faith was very strong and it didn't stagger. And I was in such a dark place because of all the trauma that I had to endure via my parents' divorce, via, like getting a stepdad and moving and leaving everything behind and all kinds of things. And I was in a really, really dark place for a long time. I went emo. I went emo. Uh, Black hair, black clothes, swoopy hair. Cutting my self-harm. There we go. Self-harm. I'll say it that way. Um, and, some thoughts about attempts, honestly. At one point, I was hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital because I hadn't slept in 4 days. Um, and I was losing my mind. I lost my marbles. um, and I was just filled with such anger and rage and sadness. And that lasted all the way until I would turn 20 years old. In 2022, at the end of 2022 was the turning point in my life. But before I get there, let's rewind a bit. So, like I said, I was going to church when I was a kid, and I truly, truly did believe in God at that time. But I asked God for something, and when that something didn't happen, which was my parents getting back together, it, it kind of just like threw me for a loop, and I stopped believing. From that point forward, I stopped believing. And anything that had to do with God, I'd kind of roll my eyes and be like, I'm not interested in that, or I don't want to hear about that. Things like that. And so I went through all of my teen years being an atheist, right? And I had many failed friendships, relationships. I was trying to fill a void with boyfriends and friends, and eventually I started filling the void within me with sex and drugs and alcohol. I started vaping at 16 and didn't stop vaping till I was 20. Um, I started drinking at 18. I had drinking before that, but not to the extent that was happening to me. I dated men who were older than me. Didn't go good. Highly don't recommend. But when I was 19 years old, I met my husband. And I said this in my wedding vows. My mom had one of her pastor friends, tell me to pray for a husband instead of a boyfriend. And even though I was atheist, I did do that. And while it didn't happen right away, it did happen. I met my husband when I was 19 years old, and his love and the way that he treated me showed me that I didn't deserve to be treated the way that I had been treated before. And it really changed things for me. I started looking at things differently. So, December 2022, I was still vaping and drinking and, sex before marriage, all of those things. And on the week before I turned 20 years old, I was on TikTok at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because you know how you scroll on TikTok, you could start at like 10 p.m. And when you look at the clock again, it's like 5 a.m. So it was one of those nights. So around like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm on TikTok scrolling. Mind you, my For You page is like animal videos and pranks and all kinds of stuff. And I get this random video about this woman talking about how the seals are being poured out on the earth. The seals from the book of Revelation. And again, the only way I can describe this is God, like the Holy Spirit reigniting within me. All I could hear in my head is like, what are you doing? Like, you're wasting this life that you are so blessed with. And that was the day that I completely decided to leave everything of this world behind and pick up my cross and follow Jesus. Was it easy? No. It was hard. I faced so many hardships. I was convicted about everything. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking. I tried to stop cursing. That one still gets me sometimes. I tried so hard. My mom bought me a Bible, and I was on top of that thing. I would go home and read my Bible for hours. And something that I once heard someone say that I can repeat now is that not only did Jesus, save me from demons and the enemy, he saved me from myself. Because sometimes we have to remember that, yes, the enemy is on the prowl like a lion, and he's always looking for someone to devour. We, as humans, are also bad. We are inherently sinful, and we don't, we crave things of this world. Our flesh does. So we have to die to our flesh. Our flesh has to die so that we can live for Jesus. And I will never, ever, ever regret picking up my cross and following Jesus. Like I said earlier, it has not been easy at all. Some days are way harder than others. Some days are super easy and just like a breeze. And recently God told me that I need to get it together, because I did have a moment of time where I was kind of like not completely in the world, but I was neglecting my relationship with God. And the podcast was put on hold because of like personal reasons, and then the elephant in the room, and scrambling, trying to get things together, but always procrastinating and putting them off. But you know what? God has called me for something, just like he's called all of us, and that is to spread the word, to build up the kingdom of heaven. And I've been asking him for the last few days, like, how do I do that? How do I do that? And what's not left my mind is to do the podcast. And so while I have trouble coming up with episode ideas, because typically I've had help in the past, this was just my thought for today, to at least get something out there, to talk about something, maybe, my story, or well, really God's story, because he did this, maybe God's story can help you and make you realize, like, if you're just randomly stumbling upon this video, or you've been watching for a while, regardless, right? Maybe you'll get a conviction, maybe things will be different, maybe you'll have a new sense of something, and things will change, and you will pick up your cross, and you'll realize how valuable your relationship with Christ is. And that's all I want, is for someone to realize that it is time to pick up our crosses. I can't quite remember which gospel it is. I think it may be Luke or Matthew. A woman, an adulteress, is being accused, and she's about to be stoned to death. And when Jesus tells people, whoever has never sinned, throw the first stone, and everybody walked away, right? When the woman gets up, Jesus helps her up, and he says, "Go and sin no more." So when Jesus picks you up, just as he's picked me up, just as he's picked millions of other people up, go and sin no more. Does that mean you're going to be perfect? Absolutely not. We all fall short of the grace of God every day. But give God everything that you can. He's not expecting you to be perfect. But God loves you. I love you. And I just pray so hard that everyone can soften their hearts and find Jesus before it's too late. Because in Isaiah, it does say to seek the kingdom before it's too late. And I don't mean this to be a fear, like to be scared or to be sad. No. But it's just the truth. So that's all I had for today's episode. Sorry it was a little doom and gloom, but I am really happy to be back in this chair. I mean, this is my prayer room. I don't not come in here, but I am happy to be back in this seat. I do have guests lined up. We're just figuring out times, and some guests aren't like in my state or in my city. So we're trying to figure out how to do all those things. I'm very, very grateful to have like a tech person helping me with the podcast. He uploads my videos, he edits them, he records them. He does a whole bunch of stuff. I also have a social media manager. If you were not aware, I do have Instagram. If you want to give us a follow on Instagram, it's Soulful Connections 118. And yeah, I am so grateful to be here right now in this moment, to be able to give my testimony and to talk about the love of Jesus Christ. So I hope if you've been here or you're new, just keep following. Thanks.